Welcome back to another episode of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast, powered by ISOFIT, Oro Muscles, and Firefly Recovery. ISOFIT is my go-to for all things isometric strength training. For more on ISOFIT, be sure to check out isofit.com. Oro Muscles revolutionizes rehabilitation with real-time actionable insights into muscle activity with live biofeedback and instant analysis, which has made a huge impact in my work with athletes. For more on Oro, be sure to check out oromuscles.com. Episodes like this are made possible by Firefly, the official recovery provider of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast. For more on Firefly, be sure to check out recoveryfirefly.com. Joining me today on the podcast is Jimmy St. Louis. Jimmy is no stranger to the podcast. He is an incredible individual doing incredible work, and I always appreciate our time together and the conversations we've had. Today, Jimmy and I dive into his past experiences as an athlete, ranging from his involvement in football, cross country, rowing, the injuries he's faced, such as multiple ACL tears, in addition to the current work he's doing with a company called Agentis Longevity. I'm a huge fan of the work that Agentis and Jimmy are doing, and I cannot wait to see how they evolve the healthcare space. I think they're providing something that the industry has really needed for a long time. And I'm so excited that we've been able to kind of give you a little bit of an insight into what they've been building over the last several months and what they'll continue to build for years to come. Enjoy. Jimmy, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to work with you again, and I really appreciate the connection we've been able to maintain over the last few years. And I love the work that you've been doing with Agentis lately. For people who might not be familiar with you and your incredible backstory, would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are and all the incredible things you've done, ranging from sport and entrepreneurship and beyond?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me back. It's been nice to stay connected and see your business grow and have the chance to share some of our story as well. So I'm happy to be back on the show with you. Yeah, for those that have not heard the story before, happy to just share a little bit of background. I've been a serial entrepreneur in the innovative healthcare space for about 20 years now. Prior to that, I had the fortune to be a multi-sport athlete, NFL football player, college football player, made a run at the U.S. Olympic rowing team as well, and have always lived this life of how do you figure out the fastest way to rest, recover, and repeat? And that's transcended into my business life as well. And when I mention some of the story around healthcare entrepreneurship, my life mission has been to work to try to solve serious health problems for people where there's largely an unmet need. And oftentimes that can be in the form of a new treatment option, and sometimes it's in the form of building a journey that patients can trust and building trust through efficacy, surrounding yourself with best in class educators and experts within this, that area of the healthcare field. The newest thing we're excited to have the chance to talk about here is Agentis Longevity and what we're doing in that marketplace, and looking forward to sharing some stories today and having some good dialogue.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so fascinating to me that you bring up that process of rest, recover, repeat, because I certainly feel like that's the life for so many athletes. They put their time in, they train hard, and then it's a matter of when can they get out there and do it again. But to your point, that same principle applies in business and entrepreneurship alike. Entrepreneurs wake up and they have to put in long days, long hours. The 40-hour work week doesn't really exist for most entrepreneurs that way. And it's always a matter of how can they put more in to get more out of it, if you will. And I think that a certain element of that, as you mentioned, is that rest and recover process as well. And I think that's something that maybe for a while we've been kind of misunderstanding. I think a lot of times people think, from an overall biology standpoint, the way we've always done things will just continue to work. But unfortunately, humans are continuing to evolve. And I think the way we intervene from a healthcare standpoint also needs to evolve with that. I'm very glad to say that I don't get the healthcare treatment that was seen 400 years ago, because some of those things just a little sketchy to me that way. But I feel like anytime we start to make sweeping evolutions in the space, there's always a little bit of pushback and skepticism at first. Is that something that you've seen in relation to the work you've done with Agentis? Or I guess I should backtrack a little bit first too. What exactly is Agentis, and what is kind of your main mission and vision statement behind the company and where you're planning to head this year?
Yeah, so if you think about the journey that I've had the fortune to be on, both in sports and in more innovative healthcare, those two worlds have had this opportunity to collide and create what I think has just been this match made in heaven. In addition to that, I partner with Shore Capital Partners, founded up in Chicago, the largest, most successful microcap private equity group worldwide, and their best-in-class team, best-in-class resources has just been another part of this equation that we know will lead to tremendous success. So what Agentis Longevity is we are a longevity healthcare platform. I believe that the longevity space has a lot of different definitions right now. And you can see that when you go attend longevity conferences or more innovative healthcare conferences, you see everybody's running down their own individual rabbit hole. And our objective is to develop a best-in-class longevity platform by partnering with best-in-class longevity partners, physicians, scientists, vendors to curate a patient experience that makes sense, that's efficient, one that is very efficacious, that gives the patients the opportunity to embark on a process they can trust. But I think also really important, accessibility, affordability. When you think about longevity healthcare right now, you think about lots of cash out of pocket, and oftentimes people believe it's really only for a certain subset of our population. Our objective is to work very hard to bring this to mainstream and to, I believe in order to do that, it has to be affordable. You have to be in areas of the country where it's accessible, and you have to be able to build trust with best in class people. Now, when you made the comment about oftentimes in innovation, there can be some resistance. And I would say that this has been a bit of a breath of fresh air. Sure, there's been some challenges, but generally people believe that a mission to live longer, healthier, happier lives, which is the mission of Agentis Longevity, it's one that everybody can get behind. And even though you've seen this transition from medicine 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0, I believe that people do generally believe that getting out in front of your healthcare issues and being proactive is a good thing, and that is difficult to push back on. So different than I think how we've approached other businesses in the past, where they did end up being somewhat disruptive. And even though they ended up being what I believe were game-changing things for patients, there was a lot of resistance. Our perspective here is let's do it different. Let's create a situation where you build trust with the healthcare community, bring those along that are interested in pursuing possibly a different way to care for a patient. So my perspective is, rising tides rise all boats, and the objective here is to lift up everybody here within this community to create a platform that we can be proud of, but most importantly, that can be a game changer for patients.
Yeah, I love that analogy. How can we bring everyone to the higher ground or higher status of health? And to your point, in a past podcast, I remember you referenced that longevity is kind of where you see the intersection between the quality of life an individual has and the duration of life that they have. Obviously, we all want to live a long time, but we also want to live a good time. And,
Right.
it certainly seems like now it's becoming possible to be able to do both. And I think a lot of times people historically looked at it and they were like, well, I can live a long time, but then something's going to break down. Like physically, I'm going to deteriorate, or mentally, I'm going to deteriorate, or I could just live a good time and, I might be, might only make it to 50 or 60, but at least it's a good life, right? But now it's like, hey, we're starting to talk about a conversation where you can be in your 80s, 90s, or even hundreds and still be able to do all of the things that you physically want to do, right? Like I think every day we open up the news and see new stories of people defying the odds, things like, running marathons and different things that like most people wouldn't expect when they see someone of a more advanced age doing that way. So I think to your point, we are certainly seeing an evolution in this longevity space, an evolution where life quality and life duration are improving at, rapid rates that way. And also to your point, I think some of the key things you brought up was the model has to make sense. It has to be efficient, accessible, affordable, and ultimately, the patient has to trust the providers that they're given. And I think those are issues that I see and talk about with a lot of athletes and a lot of even providers on the podcast is a lot of times they feel like, they're prescribing interventions that they don't fully understand, or they feel like there could be a more effective way to get things done, but they're not able to do that because of some kind of artificial barrier or roadblock that exists in the system. Or in other, and going on the accessibility route for a second, there's been patients that I've worked with in clinic that, we unfortunately can't continue to see them because they can't afford to pay. And their insurance decided, you know what, we can't cover this anymore. So there's certainly a lot of issues in the healthcare space. And it sounds like you've identified almost all of them. And it sounds like you're working to correct almost all of them in one model that way. I'm curious, what's different about your framework that you've built for Agentis that's allowed you to kind of solve all these issues that I think a lot of people in the healthcare space recognize, but haven't been able to really, get a grasp on, if you will.
So if you think about our strategy, Agentis Longevity has a roadmap that we've started to execute on that we believe will build this best-in-class platform. And the idea of helping people live longer, healthier, happier lives really starts at the beginning with educating to build trust, to help individuals adopt healthcare services that, one, they may not have thought they had access to before, two, they may not have known about, and three, do so in a manner that just becomes part of their lifestyle. I think that oftentimes you look at longevity and you look at healthcare, and people think about them differently in more of a bifurcated manner, where our perspective is healthcare should be there as a support, but your longevity initiative should be there as a lifestyle. Now, to talk about the differentiators, it's first important to note what these first 2 years look like for Agentis Longevity. Those first 2 years look like we are out there securing best-in-class partnerships first. Said differently, we are acquiring best-in-class longevity healthcare operations. We are bringing in great resources, but more importantly, as we acquire more and more, they at the top are sharing their best practices. You might have one longevity healthcare practice that is really great at hormone optimization. You might have another one that is very, very good at cellular therapy, and another that's very good at therapeutic plasma exchange. And each of them may have their own individual patient journey, and all those patient journeys will certainly be efficacious. We will only partner with best-in-class brands who have great outcomes, who have happy patients, who are doing something very, very well. So when you think about that network effect, our objective is to first acquire those best-in-class longevity healthcare practices, to expand what we call this honeycomb of services, right? So you think about all the different things that would go into a longevity healthcare initiative and or journey for the patient. We want to secure those best-in-class practices and expand the services across all of our clinics by allowing those clinics to share their best practices with one another. So there's a network effect. There's an organic growth model there that allows us to really, really get precise about that patient journey. Over time, as we develop that blueprint, then we will open up individual clinics of our own, right? So we will, throughout the country, continue to open up that true ideal longevity healthcare practice. And I would tell you that the differentiator for this is accessibility and affordability. We need this to be affordable to everyone, to have the large majority of people see it, trust it, feel it, and gain access to it. So we do that by building out this incredible board of directors of best in class world leaders in their own right in their own individual fields, as well as building a world-class management team that allows us to work and collaborate with the partners that we are acquiring. So as you think about that, we aren't out there just trying to reinvent the wheel. What we're just trying to do is to be a great facilitator of best in class practices that give us the opportunity to expand the services. So to me, that plus affordability are the two major differentiators from where I think the world has lived before. The difference, though, is where in the past where we would have resistance, we're seeing nothing but excitement and people being aligned to that vision. Even individual operators, individual vendors who are running down their own rabbit hole, they're excited about this particular initiative because I think they see it as that platform to really be able to execute. And I'll close this part by saying it's been a wonderful thing because I truly believe that the majority of people in this space are mission driven. They want to accomplish a mission, they have something to prove. I think generally everybody believes that in order to accomplish the mission, we have to do it together.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's such a great point. We do have to do it together. And to your point about the network effect as well, I've yet to meet one single clinician that is 100% right 100% of the time, myself included that way. We need each other. We rely on each other. We're social beings. Kelly Starrett had a great line on the podcast recently about how, the brain is made to do dope stuff together with other dope people that way, right? And I think the network effect really ties into that. And I think you're building something powerful, impactful that we haven't seen elsewhere. And I think the more we bring like-minded individuals together for that common mission and common goal of, hey, how can we best provide for the person in front of us, but then also have this system where we're constantly asking each other, hey, what can we do to be better? How can we compare notes? But also, hey, we can almost look at every patient that we look at or every patient that we work with as an individual case study and reflect back and say, hey, here's what we did. Here's the effect we got. Why did we get that? What could we have done differently? Could we have done something better? It always opens up this new opportunity to learn and push the needle even further forward that way when you involve other providers and collaborate and care that way. And I think that's very exciting stuff. As you mentioned, you haven't really had any kind of pushback at all with this, and I don't see why anyone would push back on it because this is certainly the kind of stuff that I've heard from people for years that we need in the healthcare space. It's just no one's actually been the one to bring it about that way. Now, as you mentioned, you've been working to acquire some high quality clinics in the space that way. I want to hear more about the clinics themselves. What exactly do they do? Are they doing like outpatient procedures? Is it more like what goes into this longevity medicine, if you will?
Sure. So I believe longevity means a multitude of things, but happy to dissect those. If you think about direct access and healthcare modalities that people are adopting to live these longer, healthier, happier lives, you think about hormone health, right? Hormone optimization therapy, and how do you gain access to that? Well, you gain access to that through this beginning of this patient journey where you should embark on some more robust diagnostics just to learn more about your body. So I think the best way to explain what all these different clinics do, I'll walk you through this more ideal patient journey that isn't just being created, but that we're currently executing on and currently growing. So if you think about upfront, it's important to gain as much knowledge about yourself as possible. There are a number of in-home testing options that are out there. The pandemic gave us permission to demand to have access to health information, to have it available at our doorstep. And so you think about things like gut health testing, food sensitivity testing, comprehensive hormone health testing, like what Function Health is doing, wonderful thing. Think about genetic testing and gene expression testing and the ability to understand you have these genes, your body's behaving in this way. Here's some things that you could do to get out in front of potential health issues from that perspective. Think about simple tests like metabolic health testing, cardiometabolic testing. The objective for us is to gain as much information about the patient at the beginning of the journey to help have logic and reasoning around the journey they're about to embark on from a treatment perspective. So the beginning of the patient journey looks like come in, get your comprehensive hormone health panel done, and then get a cognitive function test, gain access to some general health information from a nutrition perspective. And when you do that, we believe we now have enough information to help you embark on your journey. That first looks like hormone optimization. That looks like getting your diet in order and being educated well from a food perspective. Put the right stuff in your mouth, right? Food is medicine. And then as you start to see results, and we measure and we benchmark the results over a certain cadence over the course of time, we then say, okay, now it might be important to do a more robust test, understand more about your genes. And now that your hormones are in order, here's some things to think about from a genetic perspective that you just were born with. But it's not something to be fearful of. I believe people often in the past were fearful to see those genes because they didn't know what to do with them. So now we are able to apply logic and reasoning to the genetic correlation to say, here's additional treatments. That could be regenerative medicine, a variety of peptide therapies. There might be some things that we want to do from a overall inflammation perspective. You think about things like therapeutic plasma exchange. These are things that help people's bodies work better for themselves. But one thing we're not going to do is to have a patient walk in the door and to have them throw in the kitchen sink of diagnostics and the kitchen sink of treatments. It's you haven't built trust. They haven't seen the efficacious nature of the procedures or of the treatments yet. We want them to see it, feel it, trust it, and have that ability to say, wow, what I'm doing here works. So over the course of that year, we will layer in more and more tests. But the idea is that's where it becomes much more personalized for the patient. So if you think about those different types of treatments, that is what each of these different clinics are doing. Some of them are practicing regenerative medicine very, very well, and they can teach us a lot. Some are practicing hormone optimization therapy very, very well. They can teach us a lot. They can then go and share those best practices to expand those services across the board.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. You kind of built this network, as you mentioned earlier, bringing all these different specialists together as it relates to hormone optimization, diet and nutrition, gene testing, regenerative medicine, peptide therapy, and beyond. And I think that the combination of all of those things really creates this holistic umbrella that you can certainly provide for someone in ways that maybe they would have been missed from a, traditional medicine model that way. I can't tell you the last time that I've had my own hormone levels tested. Now, obviously, I'm healthy 27-year-old who works out, eats clean, all that. So we like to think that there's no issue, but it's like if you're not assessing it, then you never really know. So I think it's awesome that you've built this kind of foundation, stepwise process of how you're going to assess over time, how you're going to layer that over time, and then how you're going to intervene on all of these underlying facets of health. Because as you know, just as well as anyone else, they all kind of interplay and impact one another. And every single person, it doesn't matter if you're an athlete, it doesn't matter if you're 20 or 40 or whatever that way, everyone needs to find a way to kind of lock in their underlying health. And I think that that's something that we've struggled with as an entire country, really, for the last several years, is we've seen the nation get a little bit more unhealthy every year. And now it's like, what can we do to kind of course correct this? And I think this emphasis on preventative medicine and regenerative medicine, how do we prevent these issues from happening? But also, how do we kind of, take individuals who maybe are not where they want to be from a health standpoint now and get them back to that level that they do want to be. And again, I don't think anyone is really immune to that. There's athletes that I've talked with that, they look fit and in shape, but you have a conversation with them and they unfortunately feel like they're in a very poor state of health. And there are things that can be done to help course correct that, but it's a matter of having the right framework in place to help that individual. If we don't have a framework to follow, then we unfortunately are unable to help people and they end up getting tossed around from one doctor to the next and they end up very frustrated. And I think we see that all the time in our modern healthcare system. And I think that this is really lining up to be the perfect remedy for a lot of the frustrations that people have faced so far.
Yeah, I believe knowledge is power. And you mentioned people that are young generally are in good health, and that generally is true, but knowledge is still power no matter who you are, right? So the ability to gain access and insights into how your body is working and how your body is unique and the things that are happening within you that are unique that might be different from the neighbor or different from another athlete who's sitting right next to you. So we believe knowledge is power. And when you have that knowledge, you now have benchmarks. So even if you don't adopt other longevity modalities, but you start to eat differently, you start to sleep better, and you start to see the needle move within your panels, now you can start to see the benefit of that. So I think everyone needs a benchmark. Everybody should understand where their hormones are. Everybody should understand where their inflammatory markers are. Everybody should understand what to put in their body to seek some level of improvement and get out in front of it. Everybody should understand some things that they just may be genetically predisposed to. And that could be everything from the APOE4 gene that is, a potential precursor to Alzheimer's to other genes that may just say you're more susceptible to inflammation or you're more susceptible to environmental factors. Just having the ability to learn those things and just understand, I believe, is the most important thing. And everybody should have that. Next, everybody should have access to understanding how to move the needle. So you get the benchmarks and the baseline. How do you move the needle? It doesn't have to be things you pay for. It could just be more knowledge on what to eat. It could be more knowledge on how to rest properly for your specific body. We're fortunate to have Sarah Gottfried, Sarah Zoll Gottfried, as one of our board members, and I consider her to be a world leader in hormone health. And she's really taught me a lot about what she calls N of one experiments. So test one thing at a time, but have those benchmarks in place to understand where's your body performing and what has made the difference. That could be eating something differently, it could be sleeping, it could be meditation, it could be hormone optimization, it could be adopting a certain peptide regimen. Those different things will have an impact on your body, and having access and information to understand what is working and then doing that over and over again with multiple N of one experiments working side by side with one another, I believe is potentially just the right first step. Get the knowledge and information, do N of one experiments, and see what's really working for your body.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point too on the N of one experiment. Going back to what I mentioned before about kind of making each individual sort of like their own case study that way. I think that there's a lot of power that comes from playing around with one variable at a time, or maybe changing one variable at a time for one individual at a time, and seeing what impact that can have on them. And I think ultimately it comes back to a combination of both self-report and objective things with that too. Objective testing. What do we see? What do we see on our, hormone panels or blood panels or metabolic panels that way? But also, how does the individual feel that way as well? Because I think that in a lot of these conversations we have around healthcare, as you mentioned, trust with the provider is essential. I find a lot of times if you just take the time to pause and ask someone how they're doing and how they felt after something, that trust goes a lot more smoothly, I guess I'll say, as opposed to just kind of saying, well, the numbers look good, let's keep it rolling. You have to kind of humanize the process, if you will, a little bit. And I realize that this is something that you're extremely knowledgeable about and passionate about, Jimmy. Is this something that you've kind of had in the works for a long period of time, or does this kind of stem back to your own athletic career that way? Or where did the initial interest in this longevity concept and optimizing all these different facets of health initially come from for you?
I think it's just been a perfect match of different parts of my life that have led me here. So I can talk about the sports background and the business side of things from a healthcare perspective. How have those two worlds collided? And then there's been some serendipitous opportunities and good timing, frankly, as well. But my background is had the chance to grow up playing multiple sports, first grew up in Seattle, which I consider running country. So cross country, track. It was my first love from a sports perspective, and then making some moves around the country. Parents were in the military, moved to Kansas, fell in love with basketball. Kept doing cross country and track, and then made a move to Alabama and was doing cross country, track, basketball, and then football entered my life. And I kept adding more and more sports where a lot of people at that age start to specialize. I was expanding what I was doing. My first story is I was asked to join the football team. My best friend was the number one recruit in the country, offensive lineman, Wesley Britt, and he said, "You got to come play. It'll be fun." And I was about this size then. I was a lot skinnier. So I was 6'5", about 190 pounds. I was running cross country, and that was my first love. And football coach said, "Hey, why don't you come play?" And said, "It's during cross country season." And he said, "We've got it all figured out." Right. And so I would wake up in 5 a.m. cross country practice. I would go lift weights during second period, and then 3:30 football practice. Friday night, football under the lights. Saturday morning cross country meets. And that first multi-sport, two sports in one season, if you will, endeavor forced me to first have to dial into my body and learn how to rest, recover, and repeat. Now, I was young and unknowledgeable, but I knew that there were certain things that were going to help me perform better. Being stronger, being faster, just getting in the weight room wasn't going to be enough. So I had to figure out that rest, recover, and repeat. That, in addition to the discipline at that age, forced me to start to understand and learn more about my body. Fortunately, had a couple good years of football and basketball and track and cross country in high school, and signed a scholarship to play football at Auburn University. And that, of course, was a wonderful experience in its own, major college football program. And then afterwards, had the chance to go on and had a decent enough college career to sign a contract and play NFL football. And that was a whole other world of its own, more of a business, and just a great learning experience. But leading into all that, I was always dialed in on my body and just trying to figure out what can help me rest, recover, and repeat. Also had a passion for school and for education. So before I even made it to the Titans, had already started pursuing my MBA, graduated after, by the time I was done playing football with three different master's degrees, MBA, Master's of Finance, Master's of Telecommunications as well, and decided to embark in the business world. And I think life is a lot about timing. Our first healthcare endeavor was a very successful one. We launched a national network of spine surgery centers, first of its kind, first to market direct to consumer, opted out of insurance, charged cash, built out a great marketing model. But more importantly, we built this incredible platform to change healthcare in the form of spine surgeries. And that just gave me, just at a young age, the chance to say, wow, there's a bigger passion here than just playing sports, can change lives by meeting unmet needs in healthcare. So that set me on this career trajectory to say, what are those things that are out there? There are massively unmet needs where there's opportunities right in front of us to leverage to do something special for patients. So when you think about that, plus then this world of sports, and I did have a second sports career, if you will, after football, while we were running our first business endeavor, I was able to continue to pursue sports, was traveling the world, doing triathlons, performing at a high level, stumbled into CrossFit. That was a nice hobby. And then found the sport of rowing. And this chapter of my life is what leads back to the question that you had just asked. And that question was, how did I get here? And, was it serendipitous, or how did I make that decision? Well, at 35 years old, I decided to try to make a run at the Olympics and try to make the U.S. rowing team. And it was a sport I had never done. First time I sat in a boat, I fell in the water, and just thinking, how can anybody do this? Well, I had to figure out how to rest, recover, and repeat at a whole new level. I believe that the sport of rowing is possibly the single most difficult, the most demanding, difficult sport because it takes skill, it takes endurance, it takes strength, it takes a lot of time. And the only way you can make up for that lack of time and experience is just by gaining experience through lots and lots of hard work. So that endeavor at 35 years old, married with some success in healthcare, saying, how do you learn how to rest, recover, and repeat? And how do you solve real problems for people? Just create this aha moment for me. And so I said, I want to spend the next 10 plus years of my life helping people live longer, healthier, happier lives by bringing front and center the things that worked for me, not just from a sports perspective, but from a business perspective and from a healthcare perspective. So it's been this journey. It wasn't just to sit down, write a business plan, and go and do something. It's been more like the stars have aligned and the world and God have led me to want to focus on something that I think is much bigger than me that the world really needs. And then I think you marry that with timing and where people are now. Peter Attia did a great job of simplifying it and calling it Healthcare 3.0. And I think that mixed with people's understanding of their body now post-pandemic has just created this wonderful opportunity and great timing for us to launch something special that can be highly beneficial for people.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love your personal tie-in with that. And it sounds like you are kind of a product of the product, if you will, that way. You're someone who has kind of walked this walk, seen the effects and the benefits of kind of a more optimal approach to healthcare and lifestyle management, if you will. Obviously you take the benefits that you reaped and now you're able to share that with others that way. And I think that's really powerful stuff when someone kind of walks the walk themselves, if you will, that way. And I think the other piece too that I want to highlight is you had this desire, as you said, you had this desire to continue to compete, but that desire kind of came from being knocked down a little bit with your rowing incident there, we'll call it. And I think that that's something a lot of times people kind of find out when it's just a little, sometimes not too late per se, but later than we might want it to be. So, for example, a lot of times when I'm working with athletes, especially after major injuries, take the ACL, for example, they go, yeah, everyone told me I should have been training more. I should have been sleeping better. I should have actually taken care of my body. But, now that I'm injured and I've had surgery, now I'm going to do that. And it's like, it kind of became this situation where it was a little too late for us to prevent something catastrophic from happening. We can still recover from it and come back, but, it's also the point where I think the more we kind of stop, pause, listen to individuals such as yourself who have kind of gone through this, learn from your own experiences and say, hey, look, I haven't, had any incidents or anything like that from the rowing team so far. I haven't had any major injuries, knock on wood, but I need to make sure that I'm taking all of my own healthcare needs and putting them as like a foundational forefront in my life, as opposed to, well, I haven't had them, I can just brush them off until it's an issue. At the end of the day, the famous quote, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, holds true. And the more proactive we can be about this whole process, the more we can pursue that desire to, again, rest, recover, repeat at a higher level and continue to do that. I can't help but wonder how many athletes and how many active individuals and even entrepreneurs are going to be able to function at levels that they've never even thought of if we can get them to understand the importance of optimizing their overall health and longevity now before anything major happens. Again, it's not to say that we can't turn time back a little bit. I think there's a whole different conversation we could have about anti-aging and, curing different diseases and so on that way. But ultimately, if you can prevent them from occurring in the first place, you're probably going to be in a much better spot.
Yeah, and I think, it's important to think about the adoption side of this. And so I believe in life, we all have 24 hours in a day. And in life, you have to be able to establish goals and what's important to you. Some things have to be on autopilot, and some things have to be intentional until you get them on autopilot and develop that habit. And I believe that it's important to not have it feel like embarking on a healthcare journey is just another responsibility, right? It should become just a way of life. What are those things that you're doing to take care of your body. How are you being intentional about it because you want to, because it's important to you, because it's something that you value. And that's what I think is foundational here is there's a mindset shift that is first important. And then when you do that, you just develop good, healthy habits. The large majority of longevity can be accomplished through lifestyle. As I say, rest, recover, and repeat. Are you sleeping right? In your recovery, are you eating the right things? Are you doing the right things for your body? Or are you abusing your body? And there's a difference, and you can see those people that have taken pride in themselves and have taken pride in their own health. And you think about that when people take pride in their own health, you don't think that they went to a doctor all the time. You think they ate right, they slept right, they exercised, they knew how to take care of their body, they knew how to rest. And that's almost like the blue zone mentality, where most of those people that are living these long, healthy lives who get into their 90s and beyond weren't consistently in and out of the doctor's office trying to be proactive. They were just proactive because it was just an important part of life from that perspective. So I think that part's very important. You talk about the side of injury. I've had three ACL tears myself, and wish I could have done certain things to prevent them. Don't know if I could have, but that part of it taught me a lot as well, just about the whole rest, recover, and repeat. I actually use that as an indicator for how is my body operating. I All three ACL tears were in the left knee, fully recovered, went on and made a run at the Olympics with that knee. Ran a very fast 40 time, post college career leading into the NFL draft, with having had two ACL tears. So there's definitely the way to rest and recover and to just learn how to rehab and care about your body. But I use that injury as a way to know if my body's working well, because if I've got some aches and pains, my inflammatory markers are probably through the roof. If the outside of my knee is hurting and my IT band gets inflamed, I'm probably overtraining and my knee's telling me that. If I have incredible knee pain when I'm doing squats, I'm not taking care of myself. So that's good. That actually serves as a way for me to see if I'm doing the right things. If I wake up with knee pain, I probably didn't sleep well. I probably didn't eat well. What's going on with my body? I need to learn to put myself in check from that perspective as well. So I think people should be thinking about those cues, and they should be thinking about their health far different than their healthcare journey. And I believe that the idea of longevity is to first think about your health and then to adopt the healthy habits and then to gain the information about yourself to embark then on that healthcare portion of the health journey of the things that we can do to be helpful for you to live that longer, healthier, happier life.
I love that analogy in relation to your knee as well. It almost becomes like your internal check engine light, if
That's
you
right.
will.
Yeah.
And I think that everyone has those little signs or warning lights going off day in and day out. For example, a couple days ago, I woke up with a terrible headache. Well, if you pulled up my Garmin score from the day, it said no sleep recorded the night before. I wonder
Mm.
why.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, they would look at that and they would say, oh, well, it's a headache. I need to go X, Y, and Z, go about my day, yada, yada, yada. And I think a lot of times we hear the symptom, we hear our body talking to us, but we don't ever go in and actually look at the diagnostic of it. Hey, what does this mean? What is this trying to tell me? And what can I do to make sure this doesn't happen again in the future that way? And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing for your knee. Now it's a matter of, hey, how can we get everyone to understand what their body is trying to tell them on the day to day, what it means, and what to do about it that way. And I think that's where, again, going back to your overall mission, I think the education piece is so essential as well, because it's not just necessarily telling people what to do, it's also getting them involved in the process, getting them to understand why things are being done, and getting them to learn a little bit more about their body so that when things do start to act up or when things do occasionally, give you that like bad day, if you will, because everyone's going to have one every now and then, unfortunately. You know what to do about it and you know how to proceed accordingly.
It's interesting at the beginning of this conversation when we were talking about the body evolving, and it's interesting because there are so many things that are more of primal nature than we probably even realize. But what's happened is over time, we as humans have created an environment that does not allow us to really tap into those natural evolutionary things that were given to us by God, and to say, how does your body rest and recover? How does your body experience discomfort from a healthy perspective? How does your body intermittent fast? How does your body gain access to certain foods at certain times of year? And this harmonious world was created for us to be able to go through these ebbs and flows, right? There was a time where you only were able to access things that were high in sugar at a certain period of time. There was times of year where it was cold. There was times of year where it's very hot, and you didn't have the opportunity to go and seek that comfort. Now, it doesn't mean that all these things that we create are bad. They're very, very good. But because we have created this environment where we do have access to comfort, we have access to food when we want it, we have access to healthcare when we want it. Now we're living these longer lives, but because we have those things, and it's served as a catalyst for the world to grow, for us to advance technologies, for us to grow the world, for us to learn more, and for us to create a much more sophisticated civilization. That said, we have to be able to pay attention that there are certain things that we are born with that are still good and they're still very natural. Intermittent fasting, eating the right things. Don't have access to sugar every day of the year. Eat high fat, high protein diets at certain times of year. Exercise and do so frequently and consistently, and do so in a manner that isn't just having to go to the gym, but that's built into your lifestyle. Like, you think about these blue zones, and each one of them had their own little nuance, right? You have over in Sardinia, the grocery store is up on the top of the hill, right? And they're walking to the top of the hill every day. And so because of that, they're walking or running hills. You think about in the Japanese culture, there was the as they're sitting on the ground and they're standing up and down every day, they're doing 100 to 150 air squats every single day because that's just what's built into their life. So we have to build those things into our life to continue to, I think, to pursue that longevity journey. But I got to that because I think it's just important again to focus on the fact that our lifestyle and our lifestyle alone can be one that gets us far in our longevity journey. And then you couple that with knowledge and information about yourself that they certainly didn't have access to many, many years ago. That allows you to then understand what are the things you can do to live this longer, healthier, happier life that may have been caused because we live in this world of comfort, and that's okay because that allows us to advance who we are as humans. But now, what are those things that we're going to do to counteract those things that may be counterintuitive to our health to help us live that longer, healthier, happier life?
Yeah, I love that. It's about how do we adopt and evolve our lifestyle more than just kind of like forcing the same little things into our life that way. And, to use a more robust example of that, I mean, to your point, I think a lot of people think they have to go to the gym for 3 hours a day in order to be healthy. But as you mentioned in relation to the blue zones, that's not always the case. It's just a matter of how do you evolve and adapt your lifestyle to what your body actually needs. And I think that the more we do that collectively as a healthcare space, the better off everyone is going to be. And I realize, as we've been talking about this is something that you're very passionate about. I'm very passionate about, and we could certainly talk all day long about it that way and still really just scratch the surface. Is there anything that we missed as we were chatting about all the incredible work you and the team at Agentis are doing and kind of the overall state of health at this point that way?
Yeah, I wouldn't say missed. I think it's just important to reinforce that what we're trying to create at Agentis is not our objective to promote the business of Agentis. It is to be an advocate for the longevity healthcare world and to
Hmm.
help live those longer, healthier, happier lives, but to make sense of what that means. There's lots of different rabbit holes that you can run down. Most of them are quite good, but I think, as healthcare consumers, are often left to be relatively confused. I even now think about, you've got so many different tools at your fingertip and they all sound cool. but we only have 24 hours in a day. And how are you budgeting your time to focus on your health while you're still doing the other things in life that are important? And because of that, somebody has to make sense of the healthcare journey. Someone has to procure the best in class upfront diagnostics to help you gain access to information. Somebody has to procure the best healthcare modalities that make the most sense specifically for you and help those be accessible and affordable, give you access to those things, and help then measure what's the benefit of those. So that's ultimately our mission is to through our best in class partnerships with best in class physicians, scientists, healthcare providers, and business operators, share those best practices to expand our services to help patients embark on a journey that's accessible, affordable, and makes sense so they can go on to live their longer, healthier, happier life.
I love that. I love that mission, Jimmy. For people who want to find out more about the work that you and the team at Agentis are doing, where can they find you at?
Sure. So agentislongevity.com, that's our website. Reach out to me directly. I look forward to the chance to connect with people. My cell phone number is 270-366-3699. Find me on LinkedIn also. But I really enjoy the opportunity to collaborate and learn from one another. I think that if you surround yourself with growth-oriented, growth-minded people, you can create something special in the world. So I invite the opportunity to have conversations with anybody who may be interested to talk about this or anything. I love the opportunity to get to know new people, especially those that are sharing similar passions.
I love that, Jimmy. You're an incredible individual, and I'm so glad we had the opportunity to have this conversation. We'll link to all of that in the description below as well. That way, if you didn't quite catch it, you can just click there. Jimmy, this was incredible. Love the work you've been doing. Thank you for everything.
Great. Thanks so much for having me on, and I appreciate it. And congrats on your success as well.